The heavy echo of footsteps filled the grand marble hall as visitors moved through the newly reopened city museum. The chandeliers shimmered. Portraits of noble families lined the ivory walls, and the air carried the scent of polished wood and quiet wealth. But beneath all that calm refinement, something strange was about to unfold, something that would shatter the composed silence of that place forever. The janitor, Mr. Lewis, had worked there for years. A humble, soft-spoken man in his late 50s, he was invisible to most, just another uniform blending into the background. But that morning, as he mopped the corridor leading to the Hall of Legacy, his hand froze mid-air. His gaze lifted toward a newly unveiled portrait, the one drawing everyone's attention. It was of a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, wearing a navy blue vest with a white shirt underneath, her eyes startlingly blue, her expression innocent but hauntingly intense. The nameplate read, "Charlotte Beaumont, beloved daughter, lost too soon." Mr. Lewis's breath caught. The mop slipped from his hand, hitting the marble with a sharp slap. He stumbled forward, heart pounding violently. "No, no, this can't be," he whispered, his eyes blurring with tears. And then, unable to contain himself, he rushed closer, ignoring the museum staff calling after him. When the curator, Mrs. Collins, hurried over in alarm, he pointed a trembling finger at the painting and whispered in a shaking voice, "Ma'am, the girl in that portrait. She lived with me in the orphanage." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of truth, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this one reach hearts that need them most. Mrs. Collins stared at him, utterly confused. To her, this was just a historical portrait, one of the aristocratic Beaumont family who had perished in a car accident decades ago. "That's impossible," she said softly, trying to steady him. But Lewis didn't hear her. His mind had already traveled years back, to the crumbling brick building that had once been St. Mary's Orphanage, the place where he had worked as a caretaker, long before the museum job. He could see it vividly, the peeling paint, the smell of old blankets, the sound of rain leaking through the roof during storms. And among the dozens of forgotten children, there had been a girl who stood out, bright-eyed, gentle, and strangely mature for her age. Her name had been Lottie. No one knew her last name. She had been left on the orphanage steps one night, wrapped in a blanket with only a locket around her neck. Inside, it was a faded photograph of a woman smiling tenderly at a baby. And on the back, the name Charlotte, written in neat cursive. Mr. Lewis remembered how Lottie would always wait by the window during visiting hours, even though no one ever came for her. She had this unshakable belief that someone, her real mama, as she called her, would find her one day. When he'd ask why she was so sure, she would just smile and say, "Because love remembers, Mr. Lewis. Even when people forget, love remembers." But then, one stormy evening, when she was barely 10, she vanished. The police searched for weeks. Some believed she ran away, others thought something terrible had happened. The orphanage closed down soon after due to neglect and lack of funding, and Lewis carried that guilt like a shadow for the rest of his life. He never stopped thinking about her, the girl with the hopeful eyes. Now, decades later, there she was. The same eyes, the same half-smile, staring back at him from that golden frame. Mrs. Collins tried to reason with him, explaining that the portrait had been restored from an old estate and the girl had died nearly 40 years ago. But Lewis couldn't accept it. "Ma'am, I swear to you," he said, his voice breaking, "I held her hand when she had nightmares. I used to braid her hair in the mornings. That girl, she was real. She lived with me." News of his strange outburst spread through the staff quickly. Some thought he was delusional, others felt pity. But Mrs. Collins, though skeptical, was struck by the raw conviction in his eyes. She decided to check the records out of curiosity. The painting, she found, had indeed come from the old Beaumont estate, the same family whose mansion had burned down under mysterious circumstances decades ago. The girl, Charlotte, was said to have died in that fire with her parents, but something didn't add up. The official records showed no birth certificate, no medical reports, no school history, nothing before age 10. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. A quiet unease settled over her as she looked again at the portrait. The artist's signature was faint, barely visible beneath the layers of restoration varnish, but something about it seemed off, too modern, too recent. Over the next few days, Lewis became obsessed. He began researching archives, visiting libraries, even contacting former social workers. Every trail led to dead ends, but one clue kept surfacing: a mysterious donor who had funded the orphanage briefly around the time Lottie disappeared. The name on the check was Margaret Beaumont. Lewis's heart raced when he saw it. He remembered Lottie mentioning that name once, saying it was the same as the woman in her locket photo. Could it be that she had been found, but her story had been buried? He requested to visit the Beaumont estate, now abandoned and crumbling outside the city. Mrs. Collins, intrigued by his determination, agreed to accompany him. The drive was silent, tension thick between them. When they arrived, ivy covered the gates and the once grand mansion loomed like a ghost of another world. Inside, dust floated in the air like fragile memories. In one of the upstairs rooms, Lewis found a child's toy, a small wooden horse with faded red paint. He picked it up slowly, tears filling his eyes. "This was hers," he whispered. Mrs. Collins noticed a charred picture frame near the fireplace. Inside it, behind cracked glass, was a photograph. A little girl in the same uniform as the one in the museum painting. But this one was clearer, unpainted, real. And on the back, written in delicate handwriting, were the words, "To my dearest Charlotte, you are finally home." A chill ran through both of them. Slowly, the truth began to take shape. A heartbreaking story of identity, loss, and desperate love. From what they pieced together, Margaret Beaumont had lost her daughter in infancy. Overcome by grief, she had poured her wealth into finding a child to fill that void. When she discovered Lottie, an orphan with the same eyes, same age, and the same name in her locket, she believed fate had returned her daughter to her. With money and influence, she had taken the girl away quietly, rebranding her as Charlotte Beaumont, erasing all traces of her orphan past. The fire that followed a year later took everything: the family, the house, the records. Only the portrait remained, painted shortly before the tragedy, immortalizing the girl who had lived two lives, one as an orphan forgotten by the world, and one as a daughter finally loved, even if just for a brief time. Lewis stood before the ruins, his hands shaking, the weight of years of guilt pressing down on him. He had always blamed himself for losing her, but now he realized she had found love in the end, even if fate had been cruel. A single tear rolled down his cheek as he whispered, "You were right, Lottie. Love remembers." Mrs. Collins placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her own eyes moist. "She didn't vanish, Mr. Lewis," she said softly. "She just went home." When they returned to the museum, the portrait seemed different, warmer somehow. Lewis asked for a small favor, to place a tiny brass plaque beneath it with an inscription. It read, "In memory of all the children who wait to be found." Visitors who came afterward often paused before that painting without knowing why. Some said the girl's eyes followed them, not with sadness, but with quiet peace, as if she finally understood she was remembered. A few weeks later, Lewis retired from the museum. He spent his remaining years volunteering at children's shelters, helping orphans find families, telling them stories of hope. Every Christmas, he would light a candle beneath that portrait, whispering, "Merry Christmas, Lottie." The museum staff never questioned it. They simply called it the Keeper's Candle, a tradition that carried on long after he was gone. Years later, a new curator found an envelope hidden behind the frame during a restoration. Inside was a small tarnished locket. When she opened it, there was a faded photograph of a woman holding a baby, and behind it, in tiny writing, the words that summed up the entire story: "Love remembers." If this story touched your heart, please don't scroll away, like, comment, And share this video to remind the world that no act of kindness is ever forgotten. Comment below, would you have believed the janitor if you were there that day? What would you have done? As the candlelight flickers beneath the portrait each year, it reminds everyone who passes by that even the smallest acts of love can echo across time, and that somewhere, somehow, love truly remembers.